Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Logic and Religion webinar. My name is Jens Lemansky. I'm a scientific board member of the Logic and Religion Association, in short, LARA. And this association organizes this excellent world seminar series. And the series is an open platform for all scholars interested in the relationship between logic and religion, reason and faith, and rational inquiry and divine revelation. And let me just say that the Logic and Religion Association also organized an on-site event that is the third edition of the World Congress on Logic and Religion, which will be take place at the Banaras Hindu University in Varanasi in India in November this year. And I think the deadline of the submission will be in spring this year. So, okay, I will shortly just introduce our chairwoman for today, that is Caroline Ting from the Logica Universalis Association in Brazil. And yeah, Caroline, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Jens Lemansky, for your kind introduction. We are very happy to have all of you in one more Logic and Religion webinar. Today's session theme is the logic of paradise, which is also the theme of the workshop that Professor Jean-Yves Beziau and I are co-organizing at the World Congress of Logic and Religion in November this year in the city of Varanasi in India. Here are a few words about it. Paradise is a famous notion in many religions. It may have different names and may come with different related notions. As a substantive, it is considered as a place whose location is not clearly known, nor the way to access it. There is also the qualitative paradisiacal, which applies to many situations and can be related to different states of mind: happiness, delightedness, hope, joy, confidence. The aim of this webinar is to study the logical aspects of paradise and paradisiacality. We are much honored that today we have two fantastic academics sharing their depth of knowledge with us. Here's how the session will work. Our two outstanding speakers will talk for about 15 minutes each. Then there will be a short discussion between Professor Jean-Yves Beziau, Professor Katarzyna GanKrzywoszyńska, and I. And finally, the questions will be open to all the public. Now it is my pleasure to introduce you our first speaker. Professor Dr. Jean-Yves Beziau is the originator of the World Logic Day, celebrated on January 14th on UNESCO calendar of international days. He is the founder and editor-in-chief of journal Logica Universalis and the organizer of the associate LU webinar. He is also the president of LUA, the Logic Universalis Association, vice president of LARA, Logic and Religion Association. He is the coordinator of graduate studies in philosophy at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, since 2019. He is the former president of the Brazilian Academy of Philosophy. He is a very prolific writer, having published hundreds of articles in scientific journals and books, and has organized dozens of symposia. Finally, I have the lucky chance and honor to have Professor Beziau as my postdoctorate advisor. His today's topic is how can we logically approach paradise? So without further ado, Professor Beziau, I give you the podium.
Thank you very much, Caroline. So let me first share the screen because I will use a PowerPoint. Just 1 minute. So I think now everything's okay. Everybody can see the PowerPoint? Yeah. All right, so I will go on. So this is the title of my short talk today. How can we logically approach paradise? Paradise and the notion of paradisiacal is a central notion in most religions. It can be a place or it can be a state of mind, like in Nirvana, for example. So I think it's a good subject for our workshop or webinar about religion, because it's one of the aim of our webinar is to really talk about all religion and to make comparative studies of the religion. And of course, the other important point of our webinar is the question of logic. Our association is called Logic and Religion. So today, what I will present is a kind of methodological exercise into logic and religion. Trying to answer this question, how can we logically approach paradise? So we can see three different aspects. Logically think the paradise, understand the paradise, which is still another thing, or logically reach the paradise. And these three aspects can apply to many notions of, many central notions of religion, and also in general. So first of all, let me remember the 4 dimensions of the logos in Greek. So this word has 3 meanings. We are put together into a same word. So that's why it's difficult to translate. There is a question of reasoning, the question of science, the question of relation, and the question of language. We'll talk about all these 4 aspects today. Now, what is paradise? Well, first of all, I will make some general consideration about semiotics. We can make a triangle, which is a quite common triangle, about 3 things, if I may say. Word, language, ideas, what we are thinking, and reality, things, as sometimes we say. So when we are talking about something like paradise, there is these 3 aspects. So we have to be aware that we are talking about these 3 aspects together. We are not talking about only just word, only ideas, or we have to take into account also reality and the word and language, word and thought together. So there are different names for paradise. We will not stick on one name. But if I have chosen this name, paradise, because I think it's in some sense the most important. I will not click here, but if you want to have a look at this website of Wikidata, it's very interesting because it will show you all the variation of this word in more than 100 languages. And there is a kind of invariance of this name. Yes, I don't know exactly for which reason, but this name you can find in many different languages. This is not the case of even. It's much more limited to a reduced number of language. Anyway, it's good to take into account the meaning of these 2 variations, if I may say. And for example, if you look at Wikipedia, which I think it's a very good tool, I like to use Wikipedia, you can have a look at what's saying about paradise, and they have chosen this picture by John Bruegel. It's interesting. And then you can have a look at what they say about heaven. And there is this picture by Gustave Doré, and you see the sky, because heaven is more related with the sky. Paradise, etymologically speaking, is more related with the garden. And you can use an etymological dictionary like this one, which is very good, where it explains that paradise is basically a garden, and it's not only the Garden of Eden, it's also related with some things from Persia, and it's a mix. So, and it has been used by Xenophon in Greek. So all this is very interesting. I will not enter in detail, but this is the background. I think it's important to take this in account from the point of view of the language. And also from the point of view of the language, we have the difference of the substantive, which is more a location, and an adjective that can apply to many different things, also to a state of mind. Okay. And we have variation of these meanings according to different religions. I mean, if we think of, for example, about Buddhism, there is not the idea of paradise as a location. It's more like a state of mind, nirvana. Now, let me emphasize, still from the semiotical point of view, that we are talking about the three aspects together, and I'll call this the notion of paradise, which is the three things together. Paradise, idea of the word paradise, idea of paradise, and reality of paradise, if any, because we don't know exactly what is the reality of paradise. Sure. I focus on the substantive, but not forgetting about also the qualificative. So I have introduced this notion in a work I'm doing on semiotics that I present with a pyramid. The pyramid of meaning. What is the pyramid of meaning? Is that we have the basic triangle on the basis. This is not my invention because this is circulating among semioticians since the beginning of the 20th century. But I have added something at the top. That's why I'm using a pyramid, which is a notion. And the idea is that the notion is the three things together. So this is inspired by Saussure, because Saussure, what he did a very original thing, what he calls a sign is signifiant and signifiant in French, together. So his version of the sign is not the usual one, it's a two together. And inspired by this, he didn't invent it, he didn't use a new name, because you say, well, the sign is fine. I think there's a bit confusion about that. But then here also I didn't create a new name, but I decided to choose the word notion to use this, to apply it to these three aspects together. So you have to remember that when I'm talking about the notion of paradise, I'm talking about the three things together. Let me give some example about this theory. We have the word sun here. The idea of sun, an idea can be a thought, can be an image, a mental image we may have. This is why I put this image. And then we have the reality of the sun that in principle, everybody can see the sun. Of course, there are some blind people, but we can see the sun. And then the notion of sun has these three things together. Let me give you another example. We go to the giraffe. Well, the sky is not only one object, it's species. And then we have here the idea of a giraffe, which is represented by the simplification diagram. And then we have the reality of the giraffe here, a photograph of a giraffe. Sure? If we go to human beings, also it's similar with giraffe. We had here the word humans. Rational animals. This is a way to think about human beings, characterization of human beings since antiquity. And then we have the reality of human beings. All this, we are here, and all people who are here in this room today are human beings. Now, if we go to some religious notion, it's more complicated because the reality part is not directly, we cannot really directly see this part. We cannot directly touch this part. That's one specificity of religion. So we have the word God or gods in Greek. I'm taking the example of Greeks. The gods are thought basically as immortals. It's a way to define them, but it's not the only way. It's a short way to define them. And then we have the reality of these people, but where are they? At the top of the Olympus, you know, I put this picture, but of course this picture is what we suspect that the Greek were suspecting to be the reality of the gods, you know. Now, if we go to if we try to make a triangle of paradise, we have the word paradise. We have an image in our mind about what paradise is, like that. And then what is the reality of paradise? That's easy to know. Okay, we can make an analogy with fear. For example, fear, the word, now there is a definition of fear. stressing emotion arise by impending anger, civil pain, and then the reality of fear that people are feeling, reality of fear. Now, see, if we think of paradise as a state of mind, maybe we may have something like that. Here, in fact, it's a mixture, because it's a mixture of place, it's kind of paradisiacal place. Sometimes people imagine paradise as a kind of tropical place. We have a paradisiac place and someone within a state of paradisiac state, here. So I put these two together, I think, because then we mixed the location and the state. So you see, this is definition of paradise I took in the dictionary. I didn't. So this is the way people are thinking about paradise: a place of extreme beauty, delight, or happiness, a state of supreme happiness, bliss. Okay, so we can make kind of triangle of paradise. Now let's go to the main part of my talk, but I think this part was a very important preliminary. The logical ways to think about paradise. So we understand a notion, so I explain what is a notion, in relation with other notions. That also was the idea of Saussure. We understand what is a sign by the relation he has with other signs. This was very fundamental in the theory of Saussure, this relation, this relational part, which is called nowadays structuralism. It's a structure. And this is also related with one of the important meaning of logos in Greek, which means relation. So it's related directly to logic in this sense, to the logos in this sense. So we have a relational approach. We want to relate the notion of paradise with other notion. If we consider that each, so for example, we can have this kind of picture. I give here as example of a star here. And the star is related with all these notions here in our thought, in the language. Now we have we have in this case of my theory of notion, we have a network of notion. Each notion is a pyramid. There is nowadays there is this picture of clouds which are used. For example, here the cloud of star. People put together the different words, and this is a kind of way to see at it. Now, for example, we can try to make a paradise concept cloud. It's not only related to his words. That's why I put the concepts instead of words. All the concepts, all the ideas that come together when someone is thinking about paradise. So that's something I took from the internet. You can see beautiful, relaxing, great, peaceful, and all these kind of things come together. So it's important to take into account this. So this is, I think this is an important part in the logical approach, to use this structuralist approach. How we can classify the different notion in a network of a notion? Well, it's connected to some notion like God. It's similar to some notion as a state of mind, like ecstasis, and it's different. And in the cloud, we can have some, because come together in our mind, also something which are different. Opposition. This come also in the cloud, like L. All right. Now I will go to a more logical, even more logical aspect, which is using the theory of opposition. So I'm working since quite a long time on this theory, which basically is a square of opposition, but which has been extended to an hexagon of opposition. I will use also these two things in my presentation today. So we are also organizing different congress of the square of opposition. The next one will be in Belgium next September. So the first question we can ask is if paradise and hell form a dichotomy. Well, here we have the table of opposite of Pythagoras, which is a series of dichotomy. And what is interesting in this table is that most of the pair form a positive dichotomy. What is a positive dichotomy? Is that the two notions in the dichotomy have a positive meaning, like here a straight line and a curve. We can think of them independently. So that's very important. All right, and we can, if we want to put them together, it's not so easy. Now, a negative dichotomy is something like a cat and a non-cat. We don't have an image of a non-cat. It's even difficult to define. We need to define it artificially. So, for example, we can put all things together which are not cats, like represented in this picture, but it's something very heterogeneous. All right. It's an abstract notion. Now, we can ask, is paradise and hell a positive dichotomy? In some sense, you know, I see this picture. Yes or no, because they have, for example, in this picture, you can see that they are different, but they're also similar. That's why I chose this picture. It's interesting, you know, you have a door, you know, you go somewhere, for example. So it's a similarity, you know. You, after, according to some religion, like even in Christian religion, after you, then you go either to hell and or paradise. So, you know, you have, there's two ways to go. So they are going together in some sense. And they are together, of course. And also about the picture, you know, but in the picture, they are like more the positive, we have a positive idea of the two, which are quite different. So this is, from this point of view, it's a positive dichotomy. You know, here you have a picture of supposedly the paradise, and here hell, you know, it's a lot of fire. It's the typical idea of hell, you know. And generally hell is down earth, you know, and the paradise is on the sky. So it's interesting to observe all these aspects. Also, if we think about the state of mind, we can make this dichotomy, you know, sometimes on the right here, someone with in a state of mind more like paradisiacal, and then sad, like more hell. And there is also like laughing and smiling. But we can say, well, maybe paradise is not a dichotomy, it's a contrariety. So we have three different things, like you can see in this picture, some kind of neutral position between the two. And in the Christian traditions, there is paradise, hell, and purgatory, which is neither hell, neither paradise. So there is a possibility of trichotomy. The triangle of which is based on the triangle of contrariety, that we can find in many different situations, logically speaking. For example, like the idea of the deontic triangle. This triangle we can apply to the traffic sign and so on. I just remember in this picture, what is the contrariety is that when we have two propositions that can be false but cannot be true together, but distinction to contradiction and subcontrarieties. We have different trichotomies in other religions, and Christian, of course, in Christian religion with the Father, the Son, and the Spiritus Sanctus, and in Indian religion there is this famous trichotomy, which is also a triangle of contrariety. Now we can ask, maybe paradise and hell, even on hell, are not neither a dichotomy nor contrariety, but they are subcontrariety. And subcontrariety means the two can go together. So there is this famous book, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, very famous book from the English literature. So marriage, you know, they go together and so on. So in this case, it's more like a subcontrariety. But is it good or not? You know, this is two different options to go to subcontrariety. Like you see that there is a relation between laughing and cheering, you know, and here in the yin yang there is a relation between the two, interaction between the two. So there can be we have to see what is the best option, if we can have a third way. You can see if we compare here these two things, sometimes there is something very there is very similar between laughing and crying. And there is expression like in French, pleurer de rire, in English, cry with laughter and something like that. So it can be a mixed state. In this case, we are going to subcontrarity. But this third way, this mixture of things, can be seen also as not so good approach. It can be seen as a kind of mediocrity, something which is between, which is a kind of mediocre. So we can choose not to go, I'm not saying that's the best way, but we can reject this third way, say, well, stop compromising. And what we want to do, this is a possible approach, will be to use really classical strong negation, yeah, and to say negative approach. So we can understand paradise concerning what it is not. Yeah. So escaping here, you know. So we can examine all what is not paradise. We don't know what is paradise, but we can say, well, we will have a negative approach, and we'll try to understand what is paradise by negating all things which are not paradise. It's a very interesting way. And this is related with what is doing in mathematics, which is considered as the highest way to reason. For example, in the case of square root of 2, it has been proved, it was proven by that square root of 2 is not rational. Rational in the sense that it's not a relation between two integer. Two natural numbers, as we say today. Well, so, but when people discovered that in Greece, they were very shocked because they had the idea that everything was the relation between, it was a natural number or relation between the two. And then there was this proof, which is considered as the starting point of mathematics by Dieudonné, a famous mathematician. And then we don't know, still we don't know what is square root of 2, but we know what it is not. It's not rational. So we can say that maybe paradise, I make an analogy, paradise maybe, if someone say, well, paradise is not rational, this will be a way to negate, to have a negative approach to paradise. I'm making a joke about the use of the word, because rational here is used more like in the logical sense. So paradise is not rational. People may say, well, paradox is not rational. Rational, it's not something directly related with logic, with rationality. So people can say that. But then, what is it? So that's an interesting way to go on. So that's the end of my talk. And this is just a starting talk. So there will, I'm working on that. I'm starting to work on that, and there will be more in the future.
So thank you very much, Professor Jean-Yves Beziau, for your very interesting lecture. Now, allow me to introduce you our next outstanding scholar. Professor Dr. Katarzyna GanKrzywoszyńska is assistant professor at the Department of Logic and the Methodology of Sciences at Adam Mickiewicz University in Poland. She pursued her postdoctorate at the Institute of Philosophy at Jagiellonian University in Krakow, also in Poland. Then she became a visiting professor, benemerita, at Autonomous University of Puebla in Mexico. She is the author of Freedom and Abundance, Dialogical Philosophy of Style. She co-authored with Piotr Leśniewski the biography Kazimierz Ajdukiewicz. I'm sorry for my pronunciation. She is the founder and organizer of the World Congress on Analogy. She is the co-editor with Juan Manuel Campos Benitez and Piotr Leśniewski of 2 special issues of methodological studies and anti-irrationalism and analogy, and a special issue titled Philosophies on Analogy. She gave classes, lectures, and seminars in Spanish on contemporary Latin American literature at the University of Stettin. Her current research fields are analytic philosophy, philosophy of dialogue, methodology of humanities, contemporary Latin American philosophy. She is the author of over 30 publications on the history of logic, methodology of humanities, and philosophy of dialogue in English, Polish, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. She is the secretary of the board of directors of the Logica Universalis Association. Along with Pietro Leśniewski, she organizes the tutorial Analogy and the workshop Timeliness of Analogy at Unilog 2022. Today, her topic is titled The Role of Analogies Between Paradise and Earth. So, Professor Dr. Katarzyna GanKrzywoszyńska, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for this beautiful introduction. Thank you for invitation. I am very pleased to be able to talk to you about this topic. And let me tell you that I feel particularly competent because a few years ago, I realized that my family name, Gan, in Hebrew means Garden of Paradise, Eden, or Garden of Light. So I think, it's a kind of destiny to this workshop. And I would like to start my talk with a story concerning Reverend Jan Zieja, an amazing Polish priest who was a radical pacifist, and all his life he was promoting understanding of the fifth commandment as thou shalt not kill nobody, never. Yeah, and he was always by the side of oppressed, rejected, poorest people, and he experienced war as a Polish Bolshevik war already as a young volunteer chaplain, and decided to sacrifice his life against hatred, violence, and war. He was a forerunner of ecumenical approach. He studied Judaism, got engaged in interreligious initiatives. During Second World War, he cooperated with Żegota, a council to Jewish people in the front for the rebirth of Poland, a Catholic organization that provided aid to Jewish people. And he was a chaplain also of Home Army main headquarters and wounded during Warsaw Uprising. And towards the end of the 60s, he got involved in the anti-communist opposition and was one of the founding members of the Workers' Defense Committee, KOR in Polish, and was a moral authority and pillar always in solidarity, gained the title Righteous Without Borders, a really wonderful man. And he, in one of the interviews, he tells a story when he was in one of the poorest and wildest part of Poland, in Polesia, when he was teaching kids and of course for free, kids that nobody wanted to teach. And later he was asked by, the parents, the fathers of the kids, a poor, really peasants, if he could also teach them. And he asked, but what do you want to learn? And they said two things, logic and gospel. Yeah, and he did that. And I think, it is amazing that these people who knew the hardest life, knew how these two things are profoundly related. Another person that I want to mention in my talk is, of course, Bucheński, also a Dominican, Polish Dominican, who founded a Krakow Circle with Bolesław Sobociński, Jan Drewnowski, and Salamucha. Before the Second World War, they had this wonderful project of logic of religion, and it was about, they believe that the structure of religious doctrines should be investigated in the same way as any other that is by means of logic and scientific methodology. And of course, this kind of theory of religion should abstain from serving as an apology of any particular confession. They believed in applying formal methods to elucidation, and Buchański really believed that, you know, we have to, even as a Catholic, that we need to make new theology. And he had also a wonderful contribution to theory of analogy, my topic of today. And he was not a member of Lwów Warsaw School, but he was very friendly with Łukasiewicz, had direct contact with Łukasiewicz, Ajdukiewicz, Leśniewski, and Łukasiewicz believed that logic is an ethic of thinking. And my dear friend and colleague, Professor Piotr Leśniewski, says even that, you know, logic is a hygiene of thinking. So my talk is also inspired by this understanding, and also one of my favorite quotes from Paul Valery that says that we have only two possible relations between people, logic and war. So I think we would all agree that there is no place for war in paradise. So, you know, the only other way is logic. So when we think about analogies between terrestrial life and paradise, we think about similarities and distinction. So usually, as Jean-Yves mentioned, we start from the negative side. Yeah, what is evil, wrong on earth, we compare with positive, good thing in paradise. So here we experience heart diseases, suffering, and finally death. So then with paradise, we imagine as a place of kindness, permanent health, lack of suffering, and eternal life. But these are only, you know, like basic and kind of trivial, weak analogies that very often result in unsatisfactory visions of paradise, or even boring one. You know, then we have a question when paradise is only extension of our terrestrial life. So then we have these problems like what age we will be. We will say we will be kids or old people in paradise, or which husband or wife we will be in paradise, or things like that. Or as I remember as a young kid, influenced by, you know, religious imaginary, I imagine a paradise as a place of endless prayer or endless mass, which was not very fascinating. And so I would like to, you know, think about, so I think we should think about deep and meaningful analogies in opposite to this, you know, like weak and shallow ones, and go to traditions that, you know, many in Christianity, but in many other different things that, you know, to go to our deep and profound experiences of enjoyment, delight, and completeness, you know, to go to the limits almost of our imagination. And then, you know, our vision of paradise should be, you know, like fulfillment, satisfaction, realization of life. And this is the tradition that we have, for example, in the introduction to Tales of Hasidim by Martin Buber. He wrote, "The core of Hasidic teachings is the concept of a life of fervor, of exalted joy." He said that through Hasidic tales is expressed the intensity and the holy joy, whereby God becomes visible in everything. Yeah? So I want to put special emphasis on holy joy. The same idea is expressed in Journal Métaphysique de Gabriel Marcel. Yeah? So a Catholic, when he speaks about joy as a plenitude, and that, you know, that he was convinced that anything that you do with joy has a religious value, because you are engaged, you are fully engaged. Yeah? So joy as one of the deep and profound analogies that make a connection with paradise. Yeah, also, and this is connected with dialogical thinking. That, you know, when you have according to Buber, this dialogical relation, it means that this is something that fulfills our horizons and engage our whole being, and then we have this experience of different understanding of time, and this is also something that is at source when we are kids. You know, I hope all of you can remember this feeling, you know, of joy. This is very concrete, so it's something can be here now, very simple, but we put a really you know a maximum value to things very simple. It can be balloon, a funny sound, or a smile, or a flower, but it can fill us with profound joy. And I think we should go back to this tradition, because, like, for example, Tonkin said that the story of Christianity is eucatastrophe, which means there is a story that starts with a joyful, beautiful event that is when Christ was born, and also ends with resurrection. So ultimate victory, overcoming death, and this is very, very important, because usually we have a lot of, as I said, this boring or sad and imaginary, while there is this very old tradition, like in, for instance, Origin of Alexandria. He speaks about apocastasis, a universal salvation. So, you know, when everybody, you know, vision of a paradise when everyone is included, and, you know, heaven and purgatory doesn't even eventually exist. Or like in Tertullian, we have this in Resurrectione. He wrote, the truth is that the flesh is the very condition on which salvation hinges. In Vulgate, we have expression paradisium voluptatis, and this very beautiful quote says, and the Lord God has planted a paradise of pleasure. Yeah, so this formula, Tertullian's formula, caro salutis, yeah, it means that, yeah, we have to learn how to be joyful, how to, you know, to value every joyful experience, full joy. The same similar idea is connected with Navajo people, I should say Diné, yeah, when they say that the fourth world, you know, this future world will be full precisely by joy, happiness, confidence, and peace. Yeah, so and joy is a first. It also put a special emphasis in it, and in dialogical tradition, we also say about this. Yeah, it is when you, yeah, when Tolkien said boredom results from, it's a punishment for appropriation. When we feel entitled to some things, when we appropriate things, then we are not able to experience full joy, because in dialogical tradition, we assume that we exist, we are connected with relation, dialogical and non-dialogical ones, but joy and happiness, peace are experienced in relation on three levels. Yeah, with the world of nature, human world, with spiritual world. We can also add a world of art. And then, like Chesterton, who said, thanks is the highest form of thought we can appreciate. And I believe that this is the deep and profound analogy that makes a connection with special understanding of paradise. But it's not, you know, we have to make an effort, because Borges was a very fond of Swedenborg and his vision of paradise. And let me say that, as Swedenborg said, that the poor in spirit and hermits are denied the pleasures of heaven, for they would be unable to enjoy them. Yeah, so we have to, like Oscar Wilde, we have to learn to be happy. Yeah, and this analogy, we have to have hope for everything. Yeah, this maximum imagination. Another analogy that I found is profound and deep and beautiful is I take from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie in her famous already talk, The Danger of a Single Story. She ends with this beautiful reflection that when we reject a single story, then we regain a paradise. Yes, so we can think about this analogy of paradise as a full story. Yeah, in Christianity also we have this vision that in paradise we will know everything. Everything will be explained. So there is this confidence, no more question. Yeah, and interesting analogy is like hell. It's a single story from one perspective. This is the arrogance, narcissism, narrow vision, emptiness, inflated ego, and from this it comes suffering, sadness, and despair. So we should never put anything noble in unnecessary suffering. So here we the more aspects of a story we know, the better. And paradise can be understood as a full story. And paradise something that we should wish to everybody, and of course to ourselves. There is nothing wrong, and it's precisely this we have to to give ourselves this best vision on everything. So let me end with this reflection. Why is the logic of paradise worth pursuing? The first answer to this question is simple: because it's an exercise in development of the imagination, assuming that the vision of paradise is one of the basic cultural models of fulfillment, joyful living in delight. This is a valuable human life. But the second answer, and this answer is an indication of an interesting and promising research project, will only be obtained when we refer to Whitehead and when we recall his approach to religion. And let me quote, he wrote in Religion in the Making: "Science, at least as a temporary methodological device, can rest upon a naive faith. Religion is the longing for justification. When religion ceases to seek for penetration, for clarity, it is sinking back into its lower forms. The ages of faith are the ages of rationalism." And in Science in the Modern World, Whitehead also wrote, "Rationality is the belief that clarity can be only reached by pushing explanation to its utmost limit." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Katarzyna, for your very interesting lecture. Now I'll open the floor for the discussion between the speakers.
Well, I don't have much to say. Maybe, Caroline, you can, if you want to make some comments about what we are saying before opening the floor to everybody. And Katarzyna, of course, if you want to make some additional comments.
Professor Beziau, you presented the etymology of the English word paradise in one of your slides, which has the radical "dis" from the Proto-Indo-European, meaning to make or to form, to build. So I wonder if that implies a connection with the idea of paradise as a tower built in order to reach God. Like in the book of Genesis, people build a giant tower in order to reach this place, which is located above them.
Yeah, I discovered this etymology of paradise by preparing this talk, and I was surprised by this root. You were talking that it's something which is built, because it doesn't correspond to our idea of a garden that we will reach. So I think it's interesting aspect, and of course it is not part of the of what we think when we think about paradise generally, but we have to take this in account, and maybe it's more related with, for example, even Buddhism, or like if we think that the state of nirvana is something that we have, in some sense, to build by understanding something. You know, this is the way Buddhism works. You know, people try to understand what are the problems, if I may say, and through this understanding, they will reach. I don't know if we can say they will build something, but at least they will go ahead. So I don't know exactly what's building. What can we build? It's kind of big. And the first prefix, para, which is very common in Greek. Well, it's this is one of interpretation of this prefix Greek, which is something around, but around what, you know, nearby and so on. So I think the etymology of paradise is interesting, but it be strange and it does not help very much to go ahead. So I think etymology sometimes is interesting, sometimes not so much. I think the word paradise is very popular because the people like the word. I mean, there is something in the word that is nice, in the sonority of the words, but not directly connected with etymology.
Thank you.
I don't know how can I ask something. I wrote a message for all people.
Just 1 minute, Anka. We will
Yes.
give you the
okay.
So one more, do you want to make some more comments, Caroline and Katarzyna?
To you, and it's me to speak now?
Yeah.
I don't know how it is work, this Zoom. What do I, yes. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, I like to thank all the speakers, the two speakers, Jean-Yves and Katarzyna, for their interesting intervention. Yes, talks. So, Jean-Yves, for you, I put down some ideas here, and my question is: did you intend to publish this paper issued from this talk?
Yes, sure, but you know, it's just nowadays just a draft. But of course, I intend to go ahead.
Of course, it's a draft. Why I put this question? Because I must revisit the ideas, your ideas. It seems to me very close the analysis that we can lead, very close to LDO of Jean-Pierre Desclée, the logic of determination of object from the point of view of logic, strictly in logic. But it must work, a very hard work for related this notion, this concept of paradise. Do not stay only in the language, in the linguistics, but logic as formal logic, if we can. I don't know. You understand what I say?
Yeah, sure. No, I don't. We can of course establish a connection with the work of Jean-Pierre, but it is not here today. But I mean,
no, he's not here today. I don't know. I mean, the logic of determination of objects is tool, rational, more, yes, it's a logic, appropriate to discuss this kind of concepts. Yes, about why paradise is not rational, that is a question, a very hard question, because first at all, what is rationality? Not mathematical speaking, of course, in the sense of, in the meaning of Descartes, or either we can enlarge the Descartes opinion of rationality. In fact, when we speak about rationality, what we understand, and the idea of dichotomy, it seems to me that nowadays a dichotomy in classical sense can.
I'm so sorry, Dr. Enka. I apologize. Yes. Because we are running short of time, I will have to pass on the discussion to others.
Okay.
But
so, I stop here. I can write a message.
Yes, please feel free to write on the discussion. Okay. Thank you so much. I think that Dr. Martin has a question, and after him, Dr. Ricardo.
Thank you very much. I wanted to refer to the problem of rationality of faith and rationality of the concept of paradise, because generally I agree with both of you, and with this comment of Whitehead, yeah, that most important times for faith was when it was rational. Now I'm running a research project, reasoning in biblical exegesis. So we are convinced that really this exegesis used many logical tools also when explaining the scriptures, and there are plenty of reasonings there. But I have a question to you. What does it mean in practice that we should have this very rational approach? Because I agree that when we engage all our powers and our reason, it means that we really accept what is given by faith. So it's very important. But what does it mean in practice? I mean, should we just, logically examine the concept of paradise like Jean-Yves did, which is what is very fruitful and good, yeah? But should we go further or not? How far should we go with our reason to think about such concept like paradise? Should we try to draw some new conclusions, or just purely rational, or we should just stop on what we have in the scriptures? What do you think? How would you react?
What I would say, of course, it's not completely clear, but. Well, for example, if I at the end of my talk, I was giving the example of possible negative approach, saying if we think that paradise is something which is not logic in various sense, and then that it can even not be reached by logic. This is interesting, and then we have to have a better understanding what is logic and what is the limit of logic. So it's a reflection also about logic. And then, of course, we can work on the other side, on the positive aspect of paradise as in the different religions. So that's what I will say. I mean, I will complement the two,
So if I may also answer this question. So for me, it would be, first of all, the goal is clarity, yeah, in the sense that there are so many, contradictory statements. So this is something very concrete. How can you act when there are so much confusion? And, Bohensky was really not very romantic about it. Yeah, he said that, you know, analytic philosophers are like people who, you know, clean the pipes. You know, it's not really a nice job, but someone has to do it. So I absolutely agree with it. And, you know, it's a famous, he's a critic of theology. Yeah, like he said, he said, I'm not entering with discussion with theologians when about Trinity when they do not understand logical relations. Yeah, so how can we talk about it? So I think here there is so much to do. It's such a pity that, you know, with the Second World War, Krakow was practically destroyed and they stopped. And but still, I believe it is a wonderful project. So great that you are doing. But okay, just for a short answer.
Okay, thanks a lot. So it would be like rationality in a way that we push it for clarifications, yeah, like you said, in very Bohensky's way.
Yeah.
Thank you for both answers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have to apologize. Dr. Filippo had the question. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay, so you prefer to
no,
talk after Ricardo?
Yeah, no problem. Sure. Yeah.
It's my turn then?
So we have Dr. Ricardo and then Filippo.
Okay, thank you very much. So first of all, thank you for the very interesting talk. I would like to hear from you two about the following point. I'm thinking about religious pluralism. Right? We know that there are very different religions. Some of them, they contradict each other. And when we speak about a concept that appears in many different religions, right? And with very, very different meanings. So it seems to me that there might be some problem when you speak about this notion in the singular and without qualifying, without saying the notion of paradise in such and such tradition. When we speak in general terms, like the notion of paradise or the logic of paradise. So I was wondering, how would you account for this plurality that exists in terms of the meaning of the word paradise or the words? And just to give you an example, Jean-Yves mentioned the concept of nirvana, but I think that's not equivalent to our Christian notion of paradise. In Hindu traditions, the right concept, the closer concept to what we call paradise would be Swargaloka. And even though some Hindu traditions, they even say that that's not the highest realm, there are higher realms than that, but there's a long discussion. But my point is only this: when we took a close look at the different religious traditions, we are going to find very, very different notions of paradise, which have different metaphysical assumptions, different methodological assumptions, even different logical assumptions, and so on and so forth. So how would you respond to that?
Well, we can see both aspects. I mean, the difference and what they have their similarity. So I think it's easier to see the difference and to point out the difference, of course, and this is important. But also it's important to try to understand what they have in common if we want to make the unification of different religions. So I think that, as you were saying, and I was saying in my talk, you know, we have on the one hand the idea of location, on the other hand, a question of state of mind, if we can use this word state, which is quite ambiguous. But anyway, so there's two things, but they are not so different in the sense that even in, for example, in Christianity, the paradise is not only a place. It's a place where you're happy, you feel good, you are purified in some sense. So this aspect also exists. And you can say for someone who believes more like a state of mind, someone who is reaching nirvana will change the world, will change the place where he's living and so on. So there is also, it will be a kind of different place. So I think the two, it's interesting to try to make some connection between, to see what the two have in common. That's will be my reply for today.
Can I just a very short comment, very short one about the word nirvana. I think it doesn't apply because nirvana means literally cessation of existence. That's what nirvana literally means.
Yeah, but
So,
sure. But if we go to etymology, I mean, there is the etymology of the word, like in the same way that there is an etymology of paradise, we have seen. But I don't think that the notion, I'm putting again the notion, I don't think the notion of nirvana reduced to the etymology. We don't need necessarily to stick to the etymology. So yeah, nirvana, there is a general idea of states, and there is some more particular meaning, like with paradise. That's what I would say.
okay, thank you, and sorry for that.
No, that's fine.
If
I'm gonna, sorry.
No, okay, me?
I thought it was over. I was about to give the mic to Filippo. Sorry.
Okay, just a short also answer. I think that's why I believe analogy is perfect tool to this topic, because even the basic understanding, like in the Husserlian approach, that university, we use term identity and difference, and in analogy similarity and distinction. So then similarity is not identity, so you are able to understand every nuance of every distinction in meaning. And also analogy in this sense is a dynamic thing, so it's really something that help us to better understand the smallest similarity is helping us to interesting creative analogical study. That's it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Filippo.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, good evening, and thank you for this great talk. So I would like to be really brief. My question is the following. So I can't fully understand the meaning behind the exercise of trying to derive or infer logical truths from concepts that regard first and second order logic. In particular, I can't fully understand how we can fulfill the gap that arises between logic and metaphysical assumptions. So for example, if I had into logic no one ever knew before, and I introduce some kind of concepts, those would be metaphysical assumptions that, in order to be true, need to be verified or demonstrated in some way. So I can't fully comprehend the reason of getting involved with paradise if I could have a different concept from some other people who have different religions. So that would be the general idea. I don't know if that's clear enough. I hope it is.
Well, I mean, it's interesting in your question remarks, because you put the notion of truth, which we were not talking, but where I didn't talk about this notion of truth in my presentation, but it's a very important notion, of course, and logic is related with truth, and religion also, as in the famous declaration by Jesus Christ, saying he's the truth, the way, and so on. So that's, I think also it's interesting way to explore what's something which is common, which is the truth, how we can reach the truth in logic, and is a way that we reach the truth in religion is completely different. The way that you were presenting logic, it's only one way to see logic, because these things that we will make a reasoning and something like that, we will lead to truth, like a formal proof and so on. This is one aspect of logic. There is also, if we see logic in a more general sense, it does not reduce necessarily to that, to deduction and so on. Now, it's also good, I didn't talk to this in my presentation, but it's also good to remember that the word logos, which is a basic word for logic, is always been used in Christian religion, because at the beginning of the famous St. John Evangelium, it is said that the Logos is God, God is Logos. So sometimes people translate this by the verb, the word, but it's only one meaning of Logos. So in the Bible, there is an association, identification of God with Logos. It is very important to take into account. And there are a lot of rationalist philosophers like Leibniz, Hegel, that go in this direction. You know, that God is the Logos, and that rationality is related with God in this sense. Now, and try to reach God by a proof, like Gödel himself did. So that's my reply for today.
Yeah, thank you for your reply. If I could add just a short answer to put my question in a more provocative way, would be the following. So how can we derive a certain conclusion regarding concepts like paradise, God, and similar if they cannot be disproven, or they cannot be taken neither as true or false? In a way.
Yeah. It's not exactly. I think it's an investigation to which we don't know yet the results. That's what I would say. I mean, it's difficult to say that the concept by itself is true or false. You know, we have to be careful about that. In principle, a concept is neither true nor false. Falsity applies in according to the tradition of logic. Falsity and truth applies to propositions. So maybe you can say, well, paradise exists. Paradise exists. Is it true or false? Okay, that's the point. But paradise itself as a concept is not something to which truth apply in the traditional logic way to see, in traditional logic and modern logic.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Ruud Sherman.
Hello. Yes. I have a slightly different take, a suggestion. I think the notion of paradise is not so much irrational, but it is not conceptual. Meaning it does not belong in any category. It's not categorical, because it's not a natural thing, it's a supernatural thing. So this is all connected. So I keep hearing paradise as a concept, but I think that is we have already made a crucial mistake. The notion is not conceptual. And then if we talk analogy, then the Bible gives a beautiful analysis and says, you are in paradise, and then you eat from the tree of knowledge, a knowledge of good and evil in particular, and then you are thrown out of paradise. So how would you go back to paradise? I would think, spit out the fruit, spit out the knowledge, go back to the non-conceptual. And then we may say, okay, well, with non-conceptual, Filippo would say that we cannot prove the existence of it, but it's all around us, it's everywhere. We call it consciousness or being. Those notions are, I think, also non-conceptual, not categorical. They do not fit in any category. They are not natural, but eventually supernatural. And of course, nevertheless, we can say that it must exist, otherwise we could not be conscious of anything. So not a question, but a comment, really. Thank you.
Yeah, I understand your point, and of course we have to take this in account. In the same way that we can say, I was just saying that in the Bible there is identification of the Logos with God, but on the other hand, we can also think. I mean, because we can also go to the direction you are talking about, that God is not something conceptual. So we have to investigate exactly what it means, but it's very important. And what you were saying about the tree, of the distinction between good and evil. So it's a very important things to understand, you know, because it's very famous part of the Bible, the rejection of the paradise. So to be put or throw away from the paradise, I think it's a very interesting talk, subject. Why did this happen? What does it mean? And so on. So thank you very much for your comments.
I have a question, possible? Right. It is not a discussion, but a remark, because I think what we lack in these lectures is the fact that paradise starts with the aesthetic experience. And all these need to rationalize is a very beautiful thing, because it is this kind of hygiene of thinking and clarifying the things. But we have a very common ground that links all the people, regardless differences of culture. It is just aesthetic experience of something extraordinarily beautiful and good. And that's just the point. And I think we need to come back to the human reality of experiencing paradise, which is a starting point for many, many approaches, different cultures, showing or revealing different approaches, different methodologies. But paradise is something really internal. And we can also, understand differences between cultures, in that someone sees something outer and other people see something inside. But the starting point is one, our aesthetic experience, of course, in terms of Greek understanding what aesthesis is, all senses, physical senses and psychic senses, and that's all.
Yeah, I think the aesthetic part is very important. Katarzyna, you want to say something?
No, okay, after you.
Yeah, of course, nice. So the idea is to take in account all the aspects, and I think as you were saying, the aesthetic part is very interesting, and I intend to in this in my work about paradise, also to have a look at all the representation of paradise by artists, you know, in my painting, and to work on that. I think that's very interesting work to do.
Yeah, I would like to just add that, that of course, I think it's hard to imagine delight without beauty, without being, engaging our all senses in experiencing beauty, and and that's like in my talk, I wanted also to put emphasis on this. Like corporal delight, in, of course, very broad sense, something is like overwhelming beauty, and I think this is idea in Hasidic teachings, in all this old Christian tradition with Orichem, with Tertullian, but contemporary with Gabriel Marcel also. So I think it is, of course, thank you for this comment, but in my opinion, there is no conflict here between these approaches. Okay, just this. Thank you.
Now we have Ioannis.
Yes, I have put a question in chat. I have a little bit explained the question that is there any relation or parallelism or comparison between Cantor's mathematical paradise with set theory and what is called paradise in religions? I have to note that in In the case of mathematical paradise, so say Cantor's set theory, this paradise is associated with freedom. We can imagine anything without any restrictions, and this freedom was in the subsequent years restricted. So some restrictions on the absolute arbitrariness of freedom were imposed. But I don't know if there is some similar concept in religions also, to say that paradise in religion is connected with freedom, and there are some restrictions on freedom. I don't know if you have a think about that.
Well, I think, of course, Cantor is very interesting in this topic because himself had some discussion with religious people, and when he developed this theory of infinity, he was asking them if it was not against their religion. So it is quite interesting. But because the infinite is also an important notion in religion, in Christian religion. I mean, Descartes is using this idea of infinity to prove the existence of God, because he's saying, well, human beings are limited, so how they can have idea of actually infinite? Say they have this idea because God gave God exists. He gave this idea. So there are a lot of things to say about that, but I will not go far away from that. I will not develop this topic today. But then also there is a question, I think, about what is going on when about mathematics. Is that, for example, you can say, well, we can develop a theory which is a construction. This Cantor's paradise, which is a construction, but so this then is go on with the etymology of paradise, that we are building something. But I think that's, I don't know exactly what's the position of Cantor, but there are some people that may say, no, it's not a construction, it's a discovery. So that we discover the real nature of infinite. And this is a true infinite, this is a paradise. Now, about your question of freedom, so it's a very important question. What does it mean? I mean, it's not clear what, of course, there is a famous quotation but that people like to about Cantor, is that say mathematics is free. But I have not studied in details what's the idea of Cantor about that, but I think it's quite ambiguous, because freedom has different meanings. So free, well, there is the idea of creation, invention. Does this what you wanted to say? I think if you was believing that we were discovering something, you will not use the free in this sense. So it's not completely clear what he wanted to say when he was saying that mathematics is free. We have to see this quote in this context. And I think in religion, freedom also is important, because even in the idea of paradise, maybe people don't talk too much about that, but the idea of paradise is a place freedom is considered as a good. You know, it's good to be free. So and by contrast, people who are in hell, in some sense, they are prisoners, like in the cave of Plato. So you know, a cave of Plato is a kind of hell, you know, because it's down the earth and so on. There is some fire and something like that. So I think the Plato's cave is like it's also interesting from this point of view. There is hell, where the human are there, and they have to get free from that, and then they have to go out of the cave to the sky. So this is so interesting in this sense.
Now I'm going to give the mic to Bill. If Bill is not there, Jack.
Oh, I
Then
can speak.
Christos. Sorry, Bill.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't really expect to be called on. So yeah, basically, Jack and I have been having a little conversation here. And so I'm just wondering, I'll just recite some of, or repeat some of the things I've been saying, is that I'm just wondering, I combat these questions from a phenomenological point of view. And so I'm wondering where we get these notions of paradise, for example. And so I've suggested here that it comes from our notions of perfection. And so we can maybe get our understanding of paradise by trying to get a closer or better idea of where this notion of perfection comes from, which itself has some of the characteristics of paradise and the things we've been discussing. In as much as we can't, it's not, it's like Marion's saturated phenomena. You know, they're not things that can be bounded, or they seem to have sort of these conceptionless conceptions, which we have some notion of, but we can't really bound them, you know, in the Levinas's notions of the other. And so I guess, so let me just complete this by saying that, first of all, I like the notion of the idea of joy and fullness. But joy, I think, as other people have pointed out, may be not the case in all understandings of paradise. Nirvana, I don't think, is associated with joy, but it is associated with some sort of perfection and perhaps fullness. Well, let me just stop there. I'm not really asking a question. I'm just trying to direct our conversation.
Okay, I think that's quite interesting. This idea of perfection, of course. I just want to remember that according to Leibniz, we are in the best of all possible worlds. So perfection is already there, but that's a view.
Can I pass the mic to Jack?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks very much. So my comment is actually quite brief, and thanks for hosting this. It's very good. I just wonder if you could tease out the differences between the universal and the particular. I mean, if we all agree that there's a universal good or a universal experience of good as such, and that it gets refracted through particular idiosyncrasies. Everyone has a definition of what good is, but not everyone's definition of good maps perfectly to someone else's. So that's what I'm trying to get at. So how do you abstract a formal quality which is universal from the particular lived experience of that quality, you know? And if that has any implications on a notion so unproblematic as paradise.
Yeah, I think it's a very important question and very logical, you know, to see the relation with the particular and the universal. There is no direct answer, but there is different way to approach. For example, since Anka was talking about Jean-Pierre Declay, he has been working on the idea to find typical example of something, you know. So the typicality of we can work. There is different way to work on universal and particular. For example, we can work on the two together, and I like this approach. Finding a typical thing, typical feature of the universality. So we can, and in this sense, the typicality is something singular. That's a way to work, and Jean-Pierre developed a theory in this sense, in general, in linguistics. I mean, but which applies to many ways, to many concepts.
Yeah, thank you. Could I just, if there's time, do you mind if I could just ask you a question? When you were dealing at the outset with your diagram of the semiotic, I'm curious what role Persian semiotic plays in that, insofar as secondness, especially in his phenomenology, is linked with actuality and reality. I'm just curious what role that plays in your pyramid, where you place the fourth notion at the top.
Yeah, I cannot give you a precise answer now because I like very much Peirce, but I don't know much the detail of his approach. So it's difficult for me to make a comment on that. But as far as I know, there is not notion in Peirce as I was proposing here.
Crystal also had a question.
Sorry, did you say Christos or Crystal?
Yes.
Oh, hi. So, in fact, I'd like to echo a little bit some of the comments before going into that, because see, this idea of perfection that was brought up actually to me kind of smacks more of psychopathology and illness, this kind of idea that you have this ideal to which you have to that we have to achieve, and is usually kind of phenomenologically speaking, because they mentioned phenomenology, persecutory ideal, and usually associated with a variety of illnesses. So I like the idea of unboundedness, and I really like the idea of spitting out the fruit of knowledge, and or in the Zen tradition digesting it fully. But I'm curious about this idea of something that lies beyond our conceptual grasp, and how how does one relate to that? I think maybe the conceptual can tell us something about how to better relate with itself and with that which is not conceptual. And I would maybe even add, maybe there's a level of positive dichotomy in Jean-Yves' kind of explanation there. So yeah, I'd be very happy to hear any comments, and any comments on the golden age and the kingdom of God and ever-presence, eternity, and so. Thank you.
Any of the speakers would like to talk about this? I think Ruth would like to react. Yes, Ruth?
Yes, it's a funny question, like how do we relate to the non-conceptual? Because I think we are what we are in essence, our essence, the essence itself, the word itself. Consciousness, my being, is non-conceptual. It doesn't have any attributes. It doesn't fit in any category. It's just which is aware of all those categories. So if you ask how do I relate to the non-conceptual, I could answer, it is what you are. So there's no relation whatsoever. You are it, and all else is conceptual. I could also react to Jack Cody's about perfection, and Christos also, if you want, and the good. Because what is good, we typically consider to be what ought to be. And what ought to be is what is. Because considering all that was and all that will be, what is now is what has to be, what is inevitable, what is necessary, what ought to be, and thus what is good. And then the funny thing, of course, is that it's always now. It's never not now. So this perfection of what is not just a particular notion that we have now, but it is, the now is always, so the perfection is always. This is really in a nutshell what deserves a little bit more bigger treatment maybe, but I hope it'll give some ideas.
Yeah, I think this question of the conceptual and non-conceptual is very important. And what I was saying, I was not saying that paradise reduced to a concept. in my triangle, there is, of course, the thought, which is conceptual, and then there is also reality. And yeah, we have to take it seriously in account reality. We don't want to reduce paradise to a concept.
Now, I would like to thank our wonderful speakers, Professor Jean-Yves Beziau, Professor Katarzyna GanKrzywoszyńska, and also Dr. Francisco de Assis, Dr. Jan Slemanski, Dr. Ricardo Silvestre, and all of you for joining us and for your very interesting contributions and questions. I apologize that I could not take all of you, but I would like to remind you that this discussion will go on in India, in Varanasi, and the call for papers for our workshop, Logic of Paradise, is still open. The link will be on the chat. And I think that Dr. Jens would like to make an announcement.
Thanks. Let me just announce our next session, which will take place in March at the 17th, and you find the link to the forthcoming lecture in the chat. I posted it. And in March, it's Professor Billy Moria, whose lecture is about panentheism and panpsychism. Are they related is the question. And I think that will also be an interesting discussion. But for today, thanks to everybody for this lively discussion we had here. Have a good day or a good night, depending on where you are. So, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.